This week on Theatre Talk.
I can't watch TV in America, to tell you the truth. It's such a load of rubbish.
Really?
Not the Dick Cavett show, of course.
Theatre Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theatre Talk. I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
Our guest this week was one of the key inspirations for this series, so Dick Cavett, it's your fault.
What have I done?
No, we're serious about that, Dick. When we sat down to put Theatre Talk together 18 years ago now, the driving force was the old Dick Cavett show because we wanted to try to achieve that lightness, that intimacy, the wittiness, and also, you know, occasionally someone would say something serious, unexpectedly.
The intellectual tone.
A lighthearted
least,
intellectual
not
tone.
The fact itself, yes. Yeah, but it took two of you to do it.
Yes.
Well, somebody has to do the work, and he's the beautiful star.
Well, what brings Dick to Theatre
Modest
Talk?
of you.
What brings Dick to Theatre Talk tonight is because he's one of Broadway's finest actors of all time, having starred in Into the Woods, which I saw you in
Funny how
years
often
ago.
they leave that out in introducing me.
But also a terrific new book, Dick Cavett. Talk show, confrontations, pointed commentary, and off-screen secrets. It's out from Times Books, and it's a collection of some of the essays you've been writing for the Times for the last couple of years.
Well, it's entirely blogs from the Times, and even to this day, there are people who don't know what the word blog means precisely, and will say, I hear you write a blog for the Times, but I can never find it in the paper. And I have to say, I think a blog by definition is online, and certainly my column is online.
This may be telling you
Times
something.
Dick Cavett, you'll find
Wait,
it.
this may be telling you something about the age of your fans, Dick, if they can't find your blog in the paper.
Well, they also use the word Victrola. So.
What was the secret to your great run as a talk show host? What was the secret to having that light touch?
I don't know if I ever thought of my run as great or small. I never expected anything I ever did in television. When I once read that the average television career is 2 years and 1 month. I guess including soaps and everything, I don't know. And I was stunned when I got a note from Jack Parr about a show I did on PBS, and in it he said, you've lasted longer than some of us. And that led me to look up, having slid off your question slightly, Jack's longevity, and you say Johnny did 30 years. Yeah. Try this at your next cocktail party. Johnny did 30 years. How many years did Jack, who made The Tonight Show the phenomenon that it became?
5.
5. You're right.
5.
Go to the head of the class.
But didn't his disposition kind of do him in?
Well, I don't know what, I was writing for him, and I thought he'd been on longer.
Yeah.
I wasn't there the whole time. But he said to me once, well after that, it's the worst mistake I ever made.
To leave.
Was leaving.
Yeah.
He never really did much after it, did he?
He did what he thought then was what he'd always wanted to do, was a primetime hour on Friday nights that has been largely forgotten.
When you were writing for him, I mean, you wouldn't have known this at the time because you didn't have an aspiration to be a talk show host.
No,
but what were you learning from him?
Everything.
What was he doing that?
Without realizing it, I soaked up a lot of Jack, and even in gestures that I would find myself doing when I finally got on the air, with my highest ambition to be a guest, perhaps, on a talk show. Never dreaming of being in the hot chair.
Did he prepare very detailed questions for people? Was he on top of everything, or did he just kind of let it flow?
Well, I think he or a genius on his staff named Tom O'Malley, if the name should ring a bell, it's either you remember the crawl of the old Tonight Show, or the voice of Alan Funt saying, and now here's Tom O'Malley pretending to be a gas station attendant, and watch what happens on candid camera.
That's right.
Tom was genius at preparing a guest. And I guess Pat Weaver, maybe his influence plus Jack's, produced the phenomenon later common of a desk and a couch and a guest chair in between them, and then you move down to the couch. And almost everybody imitated that until somebody put it on the other side of the stage once and looked left. I got rid of the desk at one point.
Yeah, I remember you
thanks
used to have
to-
just chairs, people sitting in a sort of semicircle.
And speaking of theater, Joe Hardy, who had been a friend from Yale, and I said, there's something uncomfortable about the way I'm doing it these days. And he came in and said, why don't you get rid of the desk? And it was nice. I didn't hate the desk. I treasured the image of me turning it to my right to Groucho Marx at that desk. But the sitting around was nice too. But you said, what did I learn? The biggest thing I learned is tellable in about a sentence. Jack called once and said, pal, if you're going to, no, I'm sorry, kid. He called people he sort of like pal. Kid, if you're going to do this, don't do interviews. That's clipboards and what's your favorite, this and that, and David Frost, and what's your pet peeve? Nobody cares about that crap. Make it a conversation.
Yeah.
That's the secret, really, when it's going best.
Let me get rid of, let me put this down, the clip.
Yeah,
the
get rid of
clipboard.
it. Oh my God, how tactless of me.
No, it's very true, and you say, you say just put the clipboards
Never
What
away.
have I done? Watch me be back on this show.
But it's precisely, though, you say this in the book, and it's true. I mean, Susan and I have been doing this a long time now, and always the best shows are where we have people we like, and you're just talking about stuff with no set agenda. So when you were doing your show, did you prepare a lot for the...
That part of your question that I also overlooked. Jack also devised the method of the talent coordinators, later to be called segment producers in my time, and then something more pretentious later. Originally they were just bookers.
Bookers, yeah.
Cheap little bookers, and then they became talent coordinators. Anyway, the format for guest notes was usually derived from Peter Ustinov was in town. I met him the other day at the he likes you, Jack. Knows you, remembers fondly being on you. He's just been to Venice and has a story about a gondola. He's just been on it. And Jack wanted those.
He wanted anecdotes.
He liked anecdotes. He used to say, tell funny stories, get funny stories out of them. Some fear that if people weren't laughing all the time at funny stories, he'd be off the air. I don't know what. And Jack would use those some, abandon them completely other times. And in both cases, he could make a great show out of it.
Right.
I almost said interview.
Isn't there the danger, though, with the anecdotes? Because we like anecdotes, too, but you can always tell when the star delivers something that's just a little too polished.
Yeah,
then you hear the tink of the can.
The cadence is practiced.
Yeah.
I don't like that. And the art of doing a chat chow is that you can disguise that if you have a brilliant anecdote that you've told 100 times and can make it appear to be the first time, if it is the first on television. But that thing you said about that little tincture of rehearsed posing as conversation is sickening when it's notable.
For example, I just watched a couple of minutes ago this Eddie Murphy on.
Oh,
you
the
were with Eddie
notorious
Murphy on David Letterman. Yeah.
Cavett Murphy I think it's on YouTube now.
It is, and it was this great bit where you come on and show a photograph of you and Eddie Murphy in bathing suits hugging each other. And
Sort of intimate, but poolside of two young fellas in Los Angeles.
And it was so spontaneous, but I wondered now how much of this was worked out.
It's funny you should ask because, and I didn't ask you to, did I?
No, you did not.
Here's your chance to tell an anecdote.
There it comes. Leaving the apartment that night to do Dave Letterman's show, the old late night Letterman show, I thought there was a Polaroid from 2 weeks ago in California. I found it. I can never find anything.
Yeah.
I found it. Then my eyes fell upon the notorious, not to spoil the surprise for anybody watching it, an item I'd purchased in Bangkok, which was an elegant tube of Darky toothpaste. With a colored gentleman in an oval picture looking like Jolson a bit.
Or Eddie Murphy said a brother with the biggest smile on his face.
With the biggest smile.
And then he said you'd go to Bangkok and punch somebody.
Yeah. Somebody called that, somebody wrote about that segment with
Yeah,
Murphy
yeah.
on Letterman, and said it was the funniest talk show segment of the year. I don't remember who said it, and of course I didn't bother to find out if we were only 3 days into that year at that point or not. But you will laugh if you just Google Dick
So did
Cavett,
Murphy know you were
Eddie
going to show the
Murphy.
photo? Did he know
He
you
knew
were going to show?
nothing.
He knew nothing.
Nothing of that. In fact, his uncle was backstage in the green room, and I said, "Do you think I should bring this out?" And he said, "Definitely." So he was hip.
That was brilliant. Yeah.
There's something wrong with your monitor. I seem to have something around here. Could I get an A camera, please?
We thought you were doing a Western series. Now.
I know.
It looks
Are you
like
moving
I
back to
might
Nebraska, Dick?
I'm looking for a different kind of role. My movie roles since Beetlejuice have been pretty much the same. Actually, I love being in the movie Beetlejuice because it was the first time I didn't get the role that nobody else wanted of Dick Cavett. So I had to be myself in about a dozen movies, it seems like.
I know. Well, I know though you take acting seriously. You were married to a terrific actress, Carrie Nye. Did you study? You studied acting?
Yeah, two times really. At Yale, there's no acting in the undergraduate school, but the graduate school had the great Constance Welch, and you could take a course there while you were an undergraduate. You could take 2 or 3 in the drama school, and then the summer I was at Stratford. 1957 as a sort of apprentice, although they called them academicians. I was in the academy. It was a bunch of apprentices, really, of varying ages and backgrounds. And that was the summer of The Merchant of Venice with, what's her name? Katherine Hepburn.
I'll never forget what's her name.
How she'd love that. Well, that's the end of this evening, Mr. Cavett.
Was she any good in The Merchant of Venice, by the way? You were around?
Yes, she was. Though I remember the director, Jack Landau, in the late Jack, in the first 4 or 5 rehearsals, he saw me walking home and gave me a ride, and up in Stratford, and he said, "How am I going to get her to stop singing?" And I knew what he meant.
Oh, her voice had a kind of
stop singing. Yeah. Now she had been coached by Constance Collier, a name not unknown
My
to you,
goodness.
I'm sure. She was a bit florid in her work, and maybe that was it. But Landau ingeniously toned it down to where it was quite effective. Yeah.
I remember once there was a period where we were all on sort of Katherine Hepburn death watch. You know, the rumors were going around town that she was dying. And I had a phone number. Robbie Lance, a wonderful old agent, gave me her phone number. And we heard that she died. And I rang up the Turtle Bay townhouse. Hello? I said, Miss Hepburn, yes, it's Michael Riedel from the Daily News. She said, I'm still alive. Click.
Oh, God.
Because she later told me people had been calling all day to see if she was still alive.
Oh, Lord. She was fielding the calls.
Exactly. Well, she was one of your, famous guests. You had a real rapport with her.
Yeah, we did. Part of it had to do with the fact, and getting her on is a long story, but right up to the last, she wasn't sure she was going to do it. First phone conversation included the line, "Well, if we don't like it, we'll just burn the tapes and not show them." And I said, "Sure." Greenbacks winging out the window. And even the day she came to the studio ostensibly just to check the set, which no one had ever done, see what it felt like to sit there, what was behind her,
Really?
what color was the carpet. Nobody else ever did that. And it resulted in a hilarious bit, which I riskily had taped secretly.
Yes, I can't remember which direction.
That
I
she
don't
doesn't
want
know
particular
television. She's
direction.
coming in.
That's the way
She
you'll
may
get
not
it.
do the show. So when she does come in this afternoon, let's tape it, and at least we'll have a little souvenir. It's funny because I had to admit the next day what I had done. Because as you may know, her joke on me was, "Well, why don't we just do the show now?"
Yeah.
And couldn't shut her up for 2 shows in 25 minutes that never got aired but are on the DVD set called Hollywood Greats. That's the first plug. But she was wonderful at that. And I think that's viewable somewhere on the internet.
Oh, yes, it
My
is
favorite,
indeed.
is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I love it because I remember that something like this happens. There was a white fence or something that went behind the chairs, and she said, "Why don't we get rid of that?" And stagehand said, "Well, we'd have to unscrew the. Don't tell me what's wrong. Just fix it."
Oh, I like that.
That's attitude.
What kind of notes did you work with? Did you have any? Or what did your segment producers or your bookers prepare for you? And then what were you flying with when you were on them?
Generally, not just
in general,
for
yeah.
Hepburn.
No,
where
in
I
general.
was just surprised.
Yeah, yeah.
I emulated the old sort of standard Tonight Show, Jack, Johnny,
did.
Merv, everybody I worked with. If the guest would be seen or talked to beforehand, someone would make some notes and give you the notes. And
So that was
you did
that
or
was your
didn't
thinking.
use them. I just remembered something. I was so nervous the first week of the first show in the daytime that I would be talking to the guest, but my notes were there. And in those days, I had 20/5 vision, which is several steps better than 20/20, so that I could read notes in elite type. Is that the small one? From
Yes.
10 feet.
Yeah.
Incredible vision. But I was scared to be caught looking at them. So I'd be talking to the guests, they'd be running out of their sentence, and I'd be thinking, I want to turn and see what else I've got, but
But really, though,
and better to just go, oh, hey, I made a note here.
let me ask you is a phrase that you don't like to use. The old cliche.
well you know me.
Let me ask you.
Who's stopping you? I
Well-
always want to say.
Well, let me ask you this.
I'll let you.
The other key, I think, to the success of your show and why we enjoyed so much was that you just cast it well. I mean, the show was about the guest, and you have to make sure you pick a guest who is going to be good, and you pick the great ones.
I have to give staff credit for that because I found it impossible to decide when a name was given to me. Do you want to have so-and-so on? And I could always think of a reason not to, partly out of fear that they've been good on other shows and they won't be with me. I'll screw them up in some way. None of these things, I think, showed on camera, but people always said you looked at ease and confident, and I usually was. But brilliantly, combinations were made. Well, who could resist putting segregationist Governor Lester Maddox on with Jim Brown, big Jim Brown, and not the singer, and Truman Capote. We knew that was going to be dynamite. Not quite as dynamite as it actually got when he walked off, but
Which one walked off?
the governor.
Oh, he did. Oh,
When I
fabulous.
refused to apologize to the people of Georgia, he said I had called them bigots. And what I had said to him before the commercial was, of the bigots who voted for you. And I hadn't said of the bigots who voted for you, meaning, poorly phrased, some people obviously were bigots. Well, the governor was smart enough to seize this.
Yeah.
You apologize to the people of Georgia. You have 1 minute to apologize. You said the people of Georgia are all bigots. They said, no, I didn't, Governor. Finally, he threatened to leave, and I said, all right, if I've called anyone a bigot who isn't a bigot, I apologize. Well, he saw through that, and the laugh was enormous, and he hauled out,
Oh,
and he
fantastic.
walked off.
What did Truman do?
Truman was wonderful. After Lester left, Truman said that he had been to his restaurant, the notorious Pick Rick restaurant, where
yeah.
Maddox was photographed waving a handle at a black, and Truman said, I went there one afternoon, and I had the chicken, and it wasn't finger-licking good. But, by the way, Maddox loved having New York Times types say erroneously that he waved an axe handle at black customers because it was a pick handle. I rather liked Lester. It's a notoriously interesting show to watch. I've seen it maybe 4 times. I'm in the edge of my chair every time as if I weren't part of it. It's so kind of thrilling.
Can
There should be
people buy
issues
that?
about- Huh?
Can people buy that in a collection?
Well, let's figure out a way. It's
Just
not-
figure out-
It didn't fit into the Hollywood greats category or into the great comedians
Famous
box.
racist. How about
And
that?
there's a rock icons box, and I didn't think Lester would be comfortable in there. He came back on a later show,
Really?
buried the axe shallowly, and it was sort of interesting.
The thing
But being a
about-
politician, knowing the value of TV time,
Yeah, yeah.
I pointed out the next night, it was in all the papers, that he was canny enough to walk off a scant 88 minutes into a 90-minute show.
I was going to say, though, I mean, he knew what he was doing. He knew.
Oh, yes.
It
He
seems to
even
me-
winked at me once with his up-camera eye. Unless it was a tick. I don't know. Why do I have a beard? Wait.
It's fabulous. The thing about your show that isn't now is it seems like everybody on Letterman or Leno or those others is pushing something, promoting something directly. I mean, you have.
Would you like to hold your book when you
Right.
answer that
The-
question?
No, but you have-
let me just
But-
light is bothering me a little. Yes, go
But
ahead.
you know, you have 3 nights devoted to Meet the Fockers there. You know, I mean,
Yeah, that's
you
right.
know, it's so they don't have interesting people.
Yeah, that's not new, but it's never been this pervasive.
It's pretty
has it?
pervasive, yeah.
Yeah.
Because, my God. Of course, I remember it always used to annoy me at Tonight Show production meetings when I was a writer. We'd sit in, and so I'd say, okay, we got Jamie Lee so-and-so on. What's she plugging? Uh-huh. And then Tom is on. What's he plugging? And I began to think back then, isn't there another way of getting on a talk show? And the other thing that irritated the hell out of me was one day the great Peter Ustinov was one of 4 guests, arguably the greatest talk show guest ever, from what Times reviewer way back called his 8 first memorable appearances on the live Jack Parr show, where they were just thrilling. And you can do any American voice, any regional accent, every foreign language, just the most entertaining, wonderful man. And I suddenly, at the meeting, raised the question, he's down for 8 minutes and then 7 minutes. And then a singer, whose name I will spare her if she's alive, was on for 7 minutes and 8 minutes to talk. And then somebody else was on for 6 and 9.
Yeah.
And I thought, what if you were to just once experiment with giving Peter Ustinov, who doesn't live here, we can't always get him, 3 segments? 4? Maybe someday the whole show. I was laughed out of the office with idiocies like, oh, people want change. You know, they don't like to watch one thing very long. They want something new, something new, something new. And I would say, well, who imparted this wisdom? I haven't seen any studies on this. Well, I was considered a little jerk.
But your show, the great old shows, compared to the way shows go today, you did seem to have the luxury of time to really let people talk and discuss things.
And one of the luxuries of that time is that somebody who may not turn out to be as good as you hoped in the first couple of segments
Warms up.
relaxes, as Miss Hepburn did. And by the time you're finished with the show about which people warned you, you're going to try to do 90 minutes with George Harrison? I mean, he's a nice guy. Well, he turned out to get better and
Really?
better and better. And I don't know of anybody who got worse.
But that's
Got drunker once in a while.
famously, of course.
And of course, the British chat show, part of its definition is a well-stocked drink trolley in the green room, so that dignified politicians as well as actors and others come on thoroughly pissed.
Did you have a drinks card in the green room at the Dick Cavett show?
No, but we got to the point where we supplied wine.
But
Really? Before the show?
Yeah, and I think it helped some people. If I had the beginning of my career to do over again, I would take at least, not having much of a head for alcohol, a tablespoon of wine before each show, the one that just takes that little edge off of nerves.
Interesting.
And yet, there were guests who, my great shows, if I say so myself, with Richard Burton.
The Richard Burton story is a great story, but we're out of time. So can we ask you, will you stick around and do sort of Dick Cavett Part 2? We'll give you a chance to promote the book again.
Buy more time or forget it. Oh, wait a minute. Of course, I'm easy to work with. Yeah.
That's right. All right, Dick Cavett is going to stick around, be with us next week. But right now, thank you, Dick, for being on our show tonight. The book is Dick Cavett Talk Show, out from Times Books. Great fun, a collection of your wonderful, thank you.
And if you pay extra, you get a dust jacket.
That's right.
By the way, honesty and transparency, that picture was not taken last week.
All right. 'Cause now you have a beard. All right.
All right,
Goodbye.
so stick around, and we'll be back with Dick Cavett next week to hear about Richard Burton.
And can't we have a stationary table? Can we have a table that's...
John?
Nobody answers
Can
in
we get
this
a
business.
table with that doesn't wobble here?
Sure. Right now,
Like
do you want it?
Yeah, nail it down.
like a butterfly.
Nail it
Mickey,
down.
What if you want to get up and dance?
What?
You may want to get up and move the table aside.
No, I wouldn't move
You'd
the
never
table
wanna move the
aside. I
table.
want to put my feet on it.
Yeah, it's a hell of a good idea.
You know, this is, haven't you got something we can put our feet on?
Some
switch the other one. This one will better? Nail it down to the floor. Okay.
This might be
this
better.
is a little solider.
Move it out. Move it out.
Just put this out
I
here.
have a card. I've been in the business so long, I don't want any complaints from the unions.
Is that one wrong?
I'm an honorary member.
That's right, you are.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.